Okay, Bob, you're on.
You did well. You know, about a year ago, I was having lunch at the bar luncheon in Meridian, Mississippi, and Leonard Cobb, who I'd known for about 30 years, was sitting next to me. Across from me, Bob Bresnahan, a divorce lawyer, we were talking, and for some reason we were talking about my experience in Vietnam.
Hold the mic a little closer.
Is that better?
Yeah.
Okay. Talk about my experience in Vietnam. We had the same problem at the Lions Club. Talk about my experience in Vietnam. And Leonard overheard us, and he looks at me, he says, "You were a POW?" And I go, "Yeah." He says, "How long?" I says, 6 years. "Why do you think I'm so gooned up?" He says, "Oh, I thought that was because you went to law school." On May the 6th, 1967, I rolled in on a target over North Vietnam. I was in an A4 Skyhawk. The clock in the cockpit said 1 o'clock in the afternoon. And it was a beautiful day. No clouds, unlimited visibility. You could see the ship's wake out in the Tonkin Gulf. I checked the plane's navigation system, it said 100 miles. I didn't think you could see that far. There was no enemy defenses, no AAA, no SAMs, no MiGs. This was a milk run. I'd done this 120 times before. My mind was already on the ship's landing pattern. We rolled in, and as we rolled out, I felt a metallic click, and the plane kept rolling, and the stick was all the way to the left. And the couple things I did, I cleaned the bomb racks off, pulled the emergency generator, I turned off the yaw dampener, nothing seemed to work, and then I saw 6,000 feet go by, and it was like, shoot, I've got to get out of this thing. That was at those dive angles at air speeds, you had to be out by 6,000 feet or you wouldn't make it. So I pulled the face curtain, I could hear the wind, and then it was like someone hit me between the eyes with a baseball bat. I saw stars. That plane was doing 525 knots, that would be 600 miles an hour, 880 feet a second. For you that like football, that would be traveling 3 lengths of a football field in 1 second. That airplane was smoking. Anyway, all I tried to do after that was hold myself together, my legs, my arms. I could see the blue of the sky, the ground, the blue, the ground. And during that, I kept saying, I lost a friend about 6 months before that. All he said was, it wouldn't work, it wouldn't work, it wouldn't work, and he never did it, Jack. And I kept saying, you know, Lord, make it work, and all of a sudden, boom, it opened up. It seemed like 20 seconds. In fact, from the time you pull the face curtain till the time the parachute opened in the A4, it was 1 3/4 seconds. It seemed like an eternity. The chute opened up. Felt absolutely no pain whatsoever. It was amazing. I looked out at the ocean about 2 miles away, the coast, quiet. You could hear a pin drop, just beautiful. I thought about my wife, my family. You know, oh boy, poor wife and family. And then it was time to get to business. So the first thing I look up to check my parachute, and the shrouds were all tangled like that. And in flight school, they say reach up and pull the shroud. So I did that, and the chute, it opened. I got the radios out, time to start communicating. I always carried 2 radios over North Vietnam. And I picked the first one, and you guessed it, I dropped it. What an idiot, you know. But I had another radio, so I got it out. I pulled the emergency beeper, and I made 2 transmissions, Raven 1, this is 2, how do you read? Raven 1, Raven 2, how do you read? And about that time, I could start hearing noise on the ground, which means I was down to about 500 feet. And it was time to land. I did hear 1 round whistling by me, and it would have been nice to know then that once you hear that round, the bullet's already passed you. Some farmer down there took 1 pot shot at me. And then it was time to prepare to land. In flight school, they say you don't want to land going forwards or backwards, you want to go land sideways. Well, we had about a 25-knot crosswind that day, and I did all I could to get what you guessed it, I landed going backwards. And I landed in a trench. And it hurt a lot. Now, the people at parachute school say, well, landing in a parachute is just like jumping off a 12-foot fence. You go jump off a 12-foot fence. It hurts, and it hurts a lot. So I hit the side of the trench. I went to release the fittings on my parachute, but my fingers here were broken, so I could only get one off. And with that wind, it wasn't dragging, it was holding me up. And about, I'm going to say from me to that door, those two doors over there, there was a Vietnamese soldier. He had his arms outstretched. I had a pith helmet. He had some, I could see some insignia. And behind him were about, 50 to 200 people. He was looking at me. I'm looking at him. His eyeballs are about the size of baseballs. I'm sure mine were about the size of basketballs. And he was just waiting to see what I was going to do. So I showed him what he wanted to see. I just opened my hands up. And when I did that, he dropped his hands. The villagers rushed me. And I don't think these folks ever saw a zipper because they had knives and they cut me out of my parachute, all that stuff. Probably in I'm going to say 30 seconds, a minute. And during that process, a couple guards were holding me, and one of them went through and took my ID card, which was in my shoulder pocket. And we were told that, well, if you don't have an ID, well, they can try you as a spy. So I slapped his hand, and there's this kid in front of me. He couldn't be 15 years old, 14, and he had the old Springfield rifle, and he fixes that bayonet, and he runs around in, and he rests the bayonet on my navel, and these other two guards are holding me. And I'm thinking of that movie, The Bridges of Toko Reed. You all seen that? Terrific Navy recruiting movie. It got me. And I'm thinking, this is just like Harry Brubaker at the end of that movie. He's in Korea, he's in a muddy trench, and the Koreans, they shoot him and kill him. And I'm thinking, this is just like that movie. This kid's going to blow me away. No one's going to know about it. And not only that, there's no music playing in the background. About that time, an old Vietnamese farmer, he comes rushing up and he pops that kid, and that's the last I saw that. And with that, they got me gathered up, and we ran maybe 100 yards to a big hut. And they sat me down. As they sat me down, there's some young lady about 16 years old with a rubber sandal. She was beating me about the face. To be honest, I never felt that I must have been in shock. Then they put a blindfold on me, and for about the next 45 minutes, the rescue planes came in and they got the snot shot out of them. Heard later that some of them took some battle damage. After about 45 minutes, they went, took the blindfold off. There was a Vietnamese sitting up on a bed. He hands me a cigarette. Well, I didn't smoke, but I took it anyway. And the lady was beating me about the face with that saddle, had a little Demitasse of tea that she offered me. So smoked the cigarette, had the tea, and it was time to head west. Now the mountains are about 10 miles from the coast, and when I got whacked, it was about 2 miles inland. So we started walking, and as we walked, we had to go through about 6 villages. And each of those villages, the villagers would come out with their sticks and stones, and they'd start trying to beat up on me. Well, you're not going to believe this, but there was about 6 armed guards with me, all with these Springfield rifles. They crisscrossed the rifles over the top of me so that the villagers would be hitting them. And I kid you not, the soldiers got beat up more than I did. They did the right thing, in my opinion. No doubt in my mind that if the villagers had their way, I'd be swinging from the tree limbs out there. That said, so we walked west toward the mountains, and we go through some rice paddies, the trails above them. And I was moving real slow because at that airspeed, I pulled every muscle and ligament in my body. And literally it took me 5 minutes to sit down when we rested and another 5 minutes to stand up. And these guards, they didn't speak English, I didn't speak Vietnamese, but there was couple rice paddies behind us, there was a bunch of people. And I found out later my airplane went in the middle of the village, so it killed some people. And they were looking at me like, you know, better pick it up a little bit, buddy, because if those folks catch up to us, you're toast. So I did the best I could, and we did make it to the mountains. And they served me a dinner. It was a little cup of rice with some greens, had something that tasted like a potato, looked like a pineapple, and you guessed that there was a fish head sitting right on top of it. And I took the fish head and I moved it. They laughed, you know, and I ate that. And about that time, the sun went down and the trucks came out. And that was the most demoralized I probably was, because I think in February that year, this was in May, Admiral comes aboard and says, we're stopping 98% of the supplies. Well, there was a truck every 50 to 100 yards heading south anywhere from 5 to 10 miles an hour all night long. And the only time they would stop would be every hour and 45 minutes. A couple airplanes would come in. One would drop a flare. All the AAA within 5 counties, you could see the orange balls going up. And then the second plane would come around, drop his bombs, and then they'd head back out to the ship. Well, when they heard the airplane engines, the trucks would turn their lights off. And what they'd done, they punched the front lights out and they put a light on the bumper with a cover over it so the planes couldn't see it. But they would turn the lights off anyway. And they would stop for like maybe 5 minutes. And then they'd crank up again, and for another hour and 40 minutes, they'd be heading south. Well, I found out years later from Kermit Hall, taught American legal history. He was flying over there. He says in '68, he says, there's no way. He says, we needed 1,200 sorties a day to stop the trucks coming down the Ho Chi Minh Trail. We only had 300 sorties a day. So he says, there's no way we could stop them. Anyway, the Admiral obviously was wrong. About that time, we're up in the foothill. About that time, truck stopped, they take me down, they put me in the truck, and we head south for about 30 minutes, stopped, and then a Jeep. They put me into a Jeep. And we headed west again, probably for about another 30 minutes. Well, get out. At this time, I'm blindfolded, and the Vietnamese are holding me. And we probably walked another 100, 200 yards, and they sit me down on top of a 2x4. Still got my hands tied, and they were tied really tight. We're inside of a hut, and I said, is there a way you could loosen up the ropes here on my wrist, because they're starting to hurt? And I hear this Vietnamese voice, do you want to complain about it? So I just kept my mouth shut. A couple minutes later, Vietnamese stand me up, take the blindfold off, untie my hands. I turn around, there's a desk. There's a Vietnamese guy, I call him Soupy Sales. He was probably 60-ish with a goatee, had a Soupy Sales hat on sideways, had a man bag, man purse. Next to him was a Vietnamese soldier with his pith helmet and olive drab and insignia. He was probably 27-ish, late 20s. He did all the talking. He says, what's your name? I go, Robert Wideman. He says, how old are you? I says, 23. He says, what city are you from? I says, well, I'd like to answer that question, but my government will not permit me to do that. He says, if you do not answer the question, I'm going to have my guards take you out and shoot you